Hear me all right? It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I can hear you perfectly fine. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. Dec, give us some intro. Give us an intro. Give us some background on you and Foras Ventures.
Absolutely. So I'm Dec. I'm one of the founding partners of Foras Ventures. We've been around for 3.5 years now. We were born from Scotland, which is where I'm from originally, alongside my founding partner Carol, who's from Chile, which is brilliant. So we have done a series of international programs over the years. So we're taking founders and startup leaders all across the world. We've been to SF, of course, New York, even Austin for South by Southwest, and across Europe. There's a few things we focus on. I'd love to obviously touch on those today, of course. We're really big on supporting founders with a global first mindset. So companies building from the UK potentially or further afield who are really, really ambitious, willing to obviously do the work and maybe need a small bit of support. So it's a small bit about us.
Dec, where does the name Foras come from? Of all the names to pick, why that one? Please tell me it's
Yeah,
Scottish.
absolutely. So I'm happy to be fact checked on any of this, of course. So it is Gaelic. It comes from Gaelic. It means a few
Amazing.
things, Gaelic and Latin. So there's a few origins of it. One of them is to travel forth together as a group. So to go on a voyage, which is obviously very symbolic of doing the international programs and maybe more broadly building a company and having a team. I guess the more generally you've got for us as well. So there's that sense of togetherness, especially when we first started. There was a real sense of doing what we could to support Scotland, but obviously more broadly UK now.
I love it. Look, I want to go back to the start. Obviously, Forest Ventures is looking to start building out a fund as we speak, right? And you're going on that journey. And we're definitely going to have to get to that because not often you get to talk to someone pre fund. It's always everyone post fund these days, right? I'm sure it's difficult. We're in an amazing time though. But I want to go all the way back to the start. Like, why did Forest start as a community first?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can give you the original origin story, which
Let's do
is
it.
quite funny. So it genuinely started as a bit of a joke on a Slack channel, which I think the best things do. So I guess for a bit of context, my co-founder and founding partner Kara and I and a few of the team originally, we'd spent a few years leading the startup grind communities across Scotland. And just for a bit of context, I know many people know startup grind, but it's a global community. It's in probably every country you can think of. Real focus on community first, giving first, making real genuine connections. And that experience for us has obviously been very, very meaningful. We'd love to get to know founders and startup leaders who are really ambitious. So for a bit of context, typically at Startup Grind, as a team, you go to Startup Grind Global, which is in Silicon Valley every year. That's their big conference. We, as a team, are already going. That was already sorted. We'd booked the flights and accommodation. And essentially, an opportunity came up with Scottish Government. They had what was called the ecosystem funds, which communities could apply for, which is quite rare because typically, obviously, there's funding for product companies and startups themselves and maybe some of the bigger organizations. So long story short, the maximum you could apply for was about 50,000,
Mhm.
which as a community who's used to running events with pizzas and beers every month for a couple £100, that's a lot of zeros.
That's a lot of
Uh,
zeros.
it's a lot of zeros. So the joke was, and genuinely, I've still got screenshots of this. As a team, we knew that the cost per person was probably 1,000 approximately for accommodation, flights, etc. And the joke was, hey, like why don't we just bring a load of founders and startups with us from Scotland and we can just take over the conference? And like we can have 50 founders, right? Because 50 times 1,000 is 550K, right? The math is perfect. There's not all these other expenses that you need to do. Obviously, of course, we do. We realized we did later. But anyway, it started as a crazy idea. A few of the adults entered the room and then we brought it down to 20 because our thinking was if we applied for 50, we'd get laughed out of the application form, etc. So we went for 20, which was more sensible. They said yes, which was amazing.
Oh, brilliant.
And then we had about, oh God, not more than 3 months to put it together, having never done anything like this before. So that was a very interesting start to the year in 2022.
How did you pick the
Uh,
founders that came on that trip? Was it the best of talent, like exceptional outliers, or was it kind of the ones that needed it most in the community at that period of time to just understand that SF and America, the vibe there, the energy there, what it takes, etc.
yeah, for sure. So we did an unapologetically long application form. So very long, like genuinely, it's probably, many, many, many questions. We had an update obviously there. So I think to answer your question specifically, I mean, I think we had about 200 applications. So obviously do the maths on that, you can only choose 10% of people. There are a few things we considered. Certainly the ambition, certainly the relevance to being an SF and making the most of the opportunity. But one of the things that actually I think we going forward will continue to care about is who they are as people. So one of the biggest things that's come out of the programs, and we still care a lot about this with community and obviously looking into fun further down the line, is it's almost a culture fit. So for us, the way we thought about it was if we were to hire for a team and we're going through interviews, I mean, most people typically will reach the usual foundation. They tick the boxes in terms of being a fit. But what we really wanted were people who were willing to be on the program and really add as much value as possible to it, but also just be a joy to be around. There's a huge focus on the peer-to-peer element. So of
Hmm.
course, founders and the startups are meeting investors and looking for funding, but we were spending all day together, traveling, staying in the same hotel, really getting to know each other just beyond kind of LinkedIn headshots type thing. So uh, that's a long answer, but the short answer would have been huge amount of data. I think we also wanted to bet on potential. So it wasn't just companies that were already there and growing and scaling. There's companies that had really amazing ideas who we felt would benefit from this huge mindset shift you have in the valley.
You're sort of seeing all of those outliers in Scotland and England and across the UK now. Have you figured out a pattern to what makes up a great founder, like a great founding team? Is it the person? Are there certain things that happen in their background?
It's a $1 million question, isn't it? Or maybe $1 billion potentially. I guess. I think there's a few things. I think when you look at it more broadly, I'm just looking at through our kind of alumni over the years. I think there's a few things. I think a real genuine deep passion for the problem they're solving, I think is really important because no matter the company you build in, no matter how successful you might be later on, it's very, very hard. Very, very, very hard. And I think you have to really almost have this crazy, slightly unhinged desire to solve something that you yourself have experienced potentially. I think that's really big. I think as well, I guess it's some really other important attributes. I think certainly resilience goes without saying, similar to that point I just made. It's a very, very difficult journey. I think creativity, optimism, I think really having I've seen one place I've seen it put well, and I don't know who said this, was having that balance between impatience, so getting things done and being really urgent and building momentum, but also understanding how long it takes is a big one. But I think I'm plugging like 5 answers here, but the other thing I think I'd come back to again would just be, are they very coachable? Are they someone who knows their strengths but knows their blind spots and stuff? I try and do that myself when I'm thinking about myself as a founder as well. So it's a few things. It's a bit of an art, I think, to discover it. I mean, we've certainly not nailed it 100%. But yeah, we try and look at people more than just a pitch deck and initial traction.
Yeah, so from what I've heard, it's very much that there's a lot of facets to the person. Resilience comes up a lot and deeply understanding the space. But then sometimes you have those outliers that are just absolutely incredible at whatever they put their hand to and can build a team around them. And I think that is also incredible today as well that we have that in Europe and it's not just the US.
Hmm.
Talk to me about
That's it.
the UK ecosystem. I'm sure you have thoughts as someone that's about to start spinning up a fund and going through those motions. In the last 3 years with the advent of AI, what do you think of the European ecosystem right now?
Yeah, for sure. I think in many ways still underrated. I think it's very easy to look at US and obviously the huge successes and multiples and exits and everything there. That's obviously always, I guess, gold standard and aspirational. I think in Europe, like you do see a lot of, again, going back to that point about founders who are really gritty, really resilient. I think there's ambition there, and I think we're starting to see that come through much more in terms of narrative. I've quite enjoyed quite a few of the initiatives recently where they're really starting to say, "Hey, like Europe, it's a great place to build." I think that's great. I know we're going to maybe touch on Estonia. That's certainly one that I'm slightly obsessed with
Oh,
for
absolutely.
reasons that we both know as we discussed it before. But yeah, maybe coming back to kind of Europe more broadly, I think there's a huge amount of strengths that the US might not have as well. So I think it's quite easy to kind of undersell ourselves. And I think as well, this is one of the things that we care about a lot, which is like who you're around, I suppose, would maybe dictate the ambition and what you're used to. I mean, one of the things that frustrate us more is a lot of founders being told they're too ambitious. We've heard that a lot, especially in Scotland. And
It doesn't
unfortunately,
compute in my head. It like what does that mean exactly? You're too ambitious.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and probably speak all day in this, but I think there's a few issues. I think a lot of the time you might hear it from people who have never been founders, so that can be challenging. Where they may be used to a different journey and they've maybe not seen how big things can get and what big success can be potentially. The other things I think as well a lot about are, and this probably could be this whole topic maybe in itself. I think people potentially, how do I say this, almost bracket every single founder into the same programs as well. So I guess certainly there's venture backable businesses which are really all or nothing, as everyone knows. That's one category. There's businesses that are more kind of steady growth, profitable. Will never be huge billion dollars. Obviously both of them are fantastic options, but I think sometimes you get people put into the same pool if that makes sense. So that's something I see quite a lot of the UK. And yeah, I think more broadly, I know we discussed this as well before the call. One of the things we'd love to see more of are founder-led initiatives. So people who have been founders or maybe they're currently founders leading much more. Maybe that's mentorship, maybe that's programs, maybe that's obviously funds themselves. I think that really goes a long way because ultimately it's a very unique journey. It's very hard. It can be very lonely, and I think you only really benefit when you're around people who've been there as well.
Absolutely. I think that's what Project Europe is sort of like leading the charge with, right? It's bringing together Europe's most incredible founders, the Collison twins, Anton from Lovable. I mean, we could just list them, right? We have incredible talent here. I want to talk specifically about the venture ecosystem within Europe. What do you think of the early stage deals that are being allocated to startups, are being talked about with early stage startups?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I think there's many doing it very well. There's many who are leading the way who obviously got quite a few US funds now with a London presence, which obviously bring that level of deal quality, I suppose.
Who do you
I think
like
one
from those US funds? Is it the Sequoias and the Crediums of the world?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, a big fan to them. I think they bring. I think they've got a lot of founder experiences within that. Obviously, the global renowned names as well. And I think the fact that they're so active in Europe, I think, is a really important signal. You know, they've been such a weight to that, which is brilliant. I think I can speak maybe to things we've seen in Scotland. I guess the caveat, of course, always with these things is it does go both ways. So I think for founders, there's maybe an element of having the education around investor readiness and knowing what a good deal looks like for you. Because again, it depends on the business you're building. I think sometimes deals can maybe be, what's the right way to say this? Sometimes founders might give away too much early on. So I've
Hmm.
seen that quite a lot in Scotland with terms that maybe make sense from a kind of investor protection perspective, which I totally understand, and I know that's really important. But actually, later down the line, especially if they really start to hit scale, can hold them back. So, of course, they might be speaking to investors in future rounds who might look at a cap table and think, not sure the founders or the founding team have enough capital or equity left to be incentivized to do this long term, if that makes sense. So that can be a blocker. I guess the other thing as well I've seen quite a lot sometimes is, especially if you maybe have deals where you give away a lot of equity and you don't fundraise as much in terms of actual money, often founders might be stuck in this continuous loop of always funding, which is really very difficult. And obviously then it's very hard to reach certain milestones that might make it easier to fundraise, whether that's obviously products and or revenue and team, etc. So I've seen that quite a lot, but I think that's what we've tried to help founders with, I guess, in a few ways. One of them is certainly network. So a lot of the focus in terms of the international programs we've done previously has been to put founders in environments where they might meet investors that have a global perspective and kind of global standards really in terms of deals, but also to show them what's possible. And I think that's one of the big things we care about a lot, which is a lot of the founders are just incredible people, incredible potential, incredibly driven. But often, if they're not around others who have like the next step up, if that makes sense, it's very
Hmm.
hard to reach that, if that makes sense. So, if you're building only in Glasgow or Edinburgh or even across the UK, sometimes the kind of local maximum, you think that's everything you can do. Whereas there might be somebody in the US or even across Europe, even Estonia, maybe as a great example, who um, is just that next level up. And if you've never been around it or experienced it, it's quite hard to imagine it.
Talk to me about Estonia. We both have a love for the country and the talent and the companies that come out of there, right? It feels like you could throw a stone into that country and you'd hit $1 billion company or $1 billion team. Why?
there's a few things I think, having spent a good bit of time. I've actually been already twice this year for a good period of time. As you know, we do a lot of work. I'm actually, as of recently, an e-resident of
Oh,
Estonia as
wonderful.
well, which is great. So that's a fantastic way into the EU for us UKers. Thanks to something that happened 10
Can I
years ago
ask
that we're knows about.
before we get into it, why do you feel like you've got to spend so much time there? Is it because of the talent, or is it because of the ecosystem there, or is it just because you have a love for the country?
I suppose all of the above, really. I think there's a few things. I think one of the things with Estonia that I think is especially helpful for the European countries is it feels like what they've achieved is more accessible. You hear this all the time where people think, oh, yeah, we'd love to be the next Silicon Valley. And I think the reality is nobody really is going to be the next Silicon Valley. Even, you know, other US cities like Austin, etc. I mean, I don't think everyone's ever going to do what's been done there. But what's really compelling about Estonia is what they've achieved with such a small population and being based in Europe. So the population is about 1 million or just over 1 million. Um, and happy to be fact checked, obviously, on any of these. But in terms of unicorns, it's about 10 or 11. So that's incredible. And I think there's a few things really. I think there's a talent, certainly, incredible tech talent. There's a global first perspective. So one of the things that I think is really interesting with Estonia is because it's only just over 1.1 maybe million people as a market, it's never really going to be your main market as a company. By default, from day one, you have to be building globally if you are building a venture scale company. I think that's really interesting.
And so they have to
And
think on that global plane.
yeah, 100%. Because one of the things that we speak a lot about with Scotland specifically, and even potentially UK, obviously UK is a great market with London, of course, as well. You can obviously do a lot here and scale. But one of the problems I see in Scotland is, so in Scotland, we're about maybe 5.5 million people.
Hmm.
It's a big enough market that you almost get caught in it. And I guess if that makes sense, so you can build in Scotland, you can almost convince yourself that it's maybe big enough. And obviously, I'm talking about companies that want to really scale, especially globally. So that's dangerous, I think. But yeah, come back to Estonia. I think there's a few things really. Global first mindset. I think they have a really fantastic focus on, and this is getting quite technical potentially, but if a company exits or if a company is a big success, how do we reward obviously founders and the founding teams? So, and obviously, I think you'll notice, of course, if you look far enough back, most successes in Estonia you can trace back to Skype. So Skype, of course, one of the early internet darlings, I suppose. I think we all probably used it back in the day. But I think the thing with Stripe, which is compelling, is not only was it a big exit and success story, but the founders and the founding teams did very, very well in terms of options and equity.
Hmm.
And what you had there was they did well enough that they were obviously able to invest back into other startups. And actually, I think a few of the team, and again, have to be fact checking any of this, spawned into family offices because of the extent of the exit, which is obviously fantastic. And I think what you had there is a really, really strong recycling loop. So, and this maybe comes back to what I was saying earlier, which is we would certainly love to see more investors who are or have been founders in the ecosystem. I think that's very important for many reasons. Estonia have done this very well. And now you actually see in almost the second and third generations. So you've got obviously Bolts, Wise, who we partner with, who are fantastic, huge fan to them. You've got Pipedrive, of course, and many, many others. And now you're even starting to see more Mafia, I guess, as they put it. So I suppose Skype is the European equivalent of PayPal Mafia back in the day. So those are a few things. But I think more broadly with Estonia, it's very, what's the word? It's very appealing because of the energy around it as well. I think there's a real sense of belief. And I think as well with the ecosystem more broadly, they really have this shared sense of, repeating shared twice, a sense of a shared goal. They really care about obviously Estonia doing well, being seen as such a digital first country. You can do everything digitally online. The government's so well aligned with startups. It's unbelievable actually. And I think with that, you have this sense of pushing in the same direction, which is really meaningful. I think sometimes in the UK, we probably do have the same goals. Like we all want startups and scale-ups to succeed. We want everyone to do well. We want companies to come into the UK and scale. But I think we've not really nailed that shared sense of mission. It's probably harder for a bigger population, of course. But yeah, that's something that Estonia is just absolutely nailed. So
Have you
we're
looked at
obsessed.
Have you looked at the Estonian ecosystem and thought to yourself, why have they been able to keep that Skype mafia there and allow them to deploy that capital? What's the environment that they've been able to build over decades and hopefully a century, let's hope, to retain that talent internally?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a few things, and I mean, what's difficult sometimes is there might be things unique to Estonia. And actually, I was speaking to one of the GPs in Estonia, one of the bigger funds, and one of the things he was saying was in Estonia, even from an investor perspective. So if you're an
Hmm.
investor, obviously putting into companies, your reputation is unbelievably important,
In
and that
Estonia
goes
or
obviously,
just across the
yeah,
board?
in Estonia. I mean, obviously it's important everywhere, right? But I think in Estonia especially, you just cannot get away with any deals that might, not be favorable to founders or taking deals from other people or not really supporting the ecosystem more broadly. Whereas, and she actually had small bits of experience in London. Whereas when you're in London, it's big enough and busy enough that you can probably, in some people's minds, unfortunately, get away with more bad behavior. People might come in and steal deals, or they might leave founders hanging, at tax deadlines because they went into other deals. I've seen that a lot where companies unfortunately have had to fold. It's such a shame. So that's a big thing. And I think as well, like a lot of it's obviously really cultural, but I think they've just really nailed that sense of we're a small country, we're quite far east in Europe, we really just need to nail this. Obviously they had independence, I think in the 90s, so it's quite, still relatively recent in terms of that. And again, we can't really emulate that. Obviously, we tried in Scotland. Some people did certainly, but slightly different. But yeah, I think those things really come to mind. So shared sense of mission, I think, is really important. Such a hyper focus on reputation. It's you just have to support people and behave well. Otherwise, you're just not gonna if you're an investor, you won't be getting deals, or if you're a founder, obviously the other sides, that'll impact you as well. So I think there's a real sense of accountability that's the highest I've seen.
One might have to get an introduction to that Estonian ecosystem. We've had a lot of the Stockholm people on. We're getting some Polish on today, Romanian, and as well. We've got a very European docket, so I'm definitely going to be reaching out for that. As we,
Great.
given that you've been talking to a lot of the GPs and you talk to a lot of investors, I want to talk about the fund or kind of the pre-fund stage that you're in. One, how's it going?
Yeah, for sure. So biggest caveat, of course, it's a very long-term mission,
Of
very long.
course.
So I think it's maybe a similarity potentially to, again, not to always come back to Estonia, but they had a shared sense of mission. As I know it's not a team, obviously it's a country. I think for us as a team, that's our North Star at the moment. We know it's going to take a long time. We're very hyper aware, obviously, of the funding environment at the moment and how difficult it is, even for very established funds and people with great track records. So for us, we're thinking of this as a few stages in terms of strategy, I suppose. So we've got a
Mhm.
team up in Edinburgh. I'm obviously helping small bits with that, building a membership at the moment. So we've got a community already. We've got 15,000 network, which we've done lot of hard work to build up. Now we're spinning that into a community, and obviously remember, obviously the fund is the end goal. So everything we're doing feeds into the fund long term, if that makes sense. So with the community, obviously there's a big focus on sourcing, inviting, bringing in companies and founders who fit that thesis, probably long term. I can chat a bit more in a second about how we're thinking about that. Uh, Everything from data. So with the membership, we'll have a really, again, probably
Rich data
unapologetic,
set.
yeah, probably a long application form, not too long, but enough that we obviously capture good info. We'll do, of course, what we can to support the companies. That's everything for us, whether that's introductions to other investors or bits around go to market, leadership, etc. And that's how we'll think about that. So we want to have that as maybe top of the funnel, long term. And then I know what the team are working on in terms of SPV. So it's almost three phases. So phase one is membership. We want to obviously nail that, give us a foundation, help us with resources as well, where we can obviously support companies, expand our network, really get to know founders beyond just a pitch deck and beyond just data. I mean, that's really important because I think one of the things that we value a huge amount, like I said earlier on, is that long-term relationship building.
Hmm.
Obviously, that's a huge thing with investing, where it's such a long time horizon. You want to be with people you can see yourself working with. Good time, pretty good times and bad. It's not all positives, obviously. So that's phase one. So that's exciting. That's launching very soon. Just about to start doing a bit of beta testing, which the team are leading on, which is great. And then with the team looking to do a few SPVs as phase two. So essentially that would be that interim where we feel confident enough where you can call it deal for potentially, or members and founders, where we can start to get into deals and maybe get used to fighting to get into the great deals, of
Is
course,
the
as well.
idea to lead at an early stage or sort of bridge deals together at a pre-seed seed stage?
I mean, more bridge deals together, really. Again, very aware that having the proper fund will take time, and I'm sure even the first fund won't be huge type thing. And I think, yeah, we probably want to kind of hedge our bets between different deals. I think one of the things I would love to have long term, so hope it makes sense. We've got membership first, SPV second, where we get our repetitions in, get into deals, hopefully have a couple of winners from there, and then obviously fund long term, which the team are working on. Um, I mean, long term, yeah, I think that might be great because I think with leading, and yeah, I've had a few discussions recently and experiences. That's where you have a great opportunity to obviously set the terms and also set the terms from maybe a more global perspective.
Hmm.
So we've obviously spent a lot of time in the US, a lot of time across Europe, where there is a big focus on really ensuring that the founders get a great deal. They're incentivized to grow the business and not feel like they're being held back with certain terms and/or giving away too much equity. We'd certainly personally love to have a big focus on employee options and the founding early teams getting a great piece of the pie as well. I mean, that's really
Keep
important.
that talent together for a longer period of time.
For sure, and hopefully with the winners as well, them getting a really decent chunk. I think that's super important. So that's important. Again, I know everyone would say they add value. That's the kind of classic trademark venture chat, which everyone says. But I think for us, because we've come from a place of community building, doing the international programs, connecting people, helping them with go-to-market and investor readiness, and bringing in experts, that's part of our DNA already. So we'll
Dec,
obviously
I
bring
think
that
it's an
into it.
interesting one. I like you look at the ecosystem right now, and everyone seems to be going back in that direction, or sort of from the top down, and you're building from the bottom up. You already have this huge community, or you've lined up this huge community. You look at the London ecosystem right now. There are a lot of VC firms putting on events, making sure there are hackathons, and it just feels like London's on fire at this point in time, right? I can only talk for London. I haven't had the pleasure of going to the Berlins and the Sonys and Stockholms of the world yet, but it feels like the right play. When we talk about phase one and phase two, what's the time horizons in your head at least?
Yeah, for sure. So phase one is immediate. Team's already got kind of group of beta testers lined up. Always happy to have a couple more. Been really selective about who we got in there. That's
Can
something I'm
we
really
can we
excited
talk
about.
about any of the ones in the beta test? Are there any standouts that you want to call out?
Still quite early on in that. I mean, there's some I can speak to more broadly though. Really happy to. I think that'll go quite nicely into pieces. So things that we're certainly very excited about as a team. Again, most people are generalists, so that's like classic chat, I suppose. But the few areas I think we really like, certainly health tech, we're
Hmm.
really big on. There's quite a few companies we know really well from across Scotland and obviously UK more broadly. Just some really exciting things in that space. Certainly climate tech as well. A few really interesting fintech companies too. We're quite big on more deep tech as well. I mean, that's a really
Love
exciting
it.
space. Yeah, it's
I don't think
proper.
I think it's enough innovation. We like the deep tech. They're always in the lab or they're always like building, and they're inside a shed somewhere sometimes, right? And you sort of got to like go out and meet them where they are because it's incredibly difficult to do. You can't always like document that process. I absolutely love deep tech at this point in time.
Me too, me too. We're very strong for it in Scotland actually as well. So one of the things we're keen to double down on is that relationship with the universities.
Hmm.
Got a really great set of connections, obviously up more broadly in Scotland, but also UK wide.
When
Some
you
great.
look at the Scottish universities, so we have like Glasgow University, St Andrews, Edinburgh University, are those kind of the top tier ones that you're looking at building relationships with?
Yeah, for sure. Also big fans of Harriet Watt and Strathclyde's. They're very good in terms of engineering and deep tech more broadly. So yeah, I've done small bits of work with them and yeah, quite impressed. Again, they're very global universities, and that's the other things that we're really keen to work on, which is how do we keep some of this more global talent as well.
Hmm.
So it was obviously it's not always outbound, it's not always UK, US. It also is the opposite, and I think that's something as the UK, I know we've had kind of tougher headlines recently of a lot of people leaving, and especially Middle East, which I totally understand. But I don't think we should underestimate the potential we have as a country to build in. It's something maybe I'd love to segue into maybe just as we finish up. we've seen some great examples. I don't know if we spoke about this before. The likes of user testing. So user testing, New York Stock Exchange listed, massive US tech company. Their European headquarters are Edinburgh,
No way.
which is amazing. And we know the kind of previous CEO quite well, and there are quite a few things there. One of them is certainly the talent from universities, especially within tech, and even coming into the AI age a bit more now. Got really strong pipeline there at the unis. And there's even things around obviously proximity, time zone wise, English speaking, of course. That's where it comes from. Obviously, even things down to kind of employment laws, which are more employer friendly, but still very favorable for employees, very easy to build teams and scale. So I think there's a few things there that we probably want to work on, maybe even in terms of positioning as a place to build a business. So yeah, I think if I wrap up maybe in terms of thesis thinking, yeah, we've always believed that the UK has been a great place to build a global company. It will remain that will remain the case. But at the same time, companies I think need more and more connections to the US across Europe via Estonia typically, and that helps set great terms early on, especially if it's founder or ex-founder teams in terms of investors and experience, and that's how you can maximize potential. I think a lot of companies aren't quite reaching their potential because maybe they don't have the right support or early terms. So that's something we'd love to come in and set long term once teams kind of built out a fund. So
Dec, I am incredibly looking forward to you building out a fund so we can constantly have this conversation and I can be a soundboard for all of this. Before I let you go, I have to ask, is there a number you're targeting for the fund size?
yeah, for sure. So team has spoken about this quite a lot. I think initially around 20 million. And again, this is long term, right? Might be a year, might be a couple of years from now as the team starts to grow and we get there. That's what we think is achievable. Again, with a bit of time, enough that we can place some good bets. And I think I've got a pieces around, well, it's not my piece, obviously, but I know how to speak about it. Micro funds being quite favorable in terms of returns and how that looks. So that's something that I think is interesting. Maybe that'll be for another chat.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to have you on like multiple segments. Dec, this has been an absolute pleasure. Go change the
Likewise.
world. I'm looking forward to this $20 million fund, Sterling fund. See you soon.
Yes, Sterling, absolutely.
Thanks so
Thanks, man.
much.
See you soon.